Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Building Subtext. Today, I'm going to talk about the Storyform for Past Lives, which was one of my favorite movies of 2023. I'd seen it a couple of months ago and couldn't really figure out the story form. It's not like Saltburn, where I knew the story form halfway through the film, or Holdovers, where I was pretty clear as to what the pivotal elements were between the main character and the obstacle character. Past Lives, I knew was fantastic, but it was the kind of narrative that I'm not able to figure out right away. In fact, I had no idea I was going to do the story form for Past Lives today until I woke up, and first thing that stood out to me was like, oh, that's what the condition for the relationship story through line, which you can see here on the left. So this is going to be a very different story for me. It's going to be all over the place, which is perfect for this kind of story form. So I'm just going to zip all the way down here and show you where I started and where it developed from there. The first thing that stood out to me was inertia in the relationship story through line. I thought for sure, like, all right, this is just a relationship that's going to keep going on. They had a past life, probably as lovers. They had to separate in the middle of this one, and then maybe I'll see you somewhere down the road. I had woken up with the idea that the relationship story condition was inertia. And I knew that their concern was the past. The idea is that the relationship story through line is moving towards the past, and how can they resolve it? How can they get over it? And I was thinking, all right, it's inertia because it's this idea that you had this past relationship. It's still going along. It's still there now, and it's going to be there down the road. So I felt like that's what was driving it. But you'll notice it doesn't even show up here at all in their relationship with the one that I finally went with. I can show you here, if I go to inertia here in subtext, and I just say, all right, this is the first one I'm going to go with. You'll see up here in the past, prediction. So I was like, all right, that might be a good issue that they're focused on in their relationship. What's going to happen somewhere down the road? If it's inertia, then that means the resistance is how things really are, which is, wow, there's actually this real connection between us. It's something that's there and something that we can define as, okay, this is a real thing, but are we just seeing things? So then the relationship would flow through actuality and perception. I went through that and just put that originally in the relationship story. But then no matter what I did with the dynamics up here, I couldn't get it to feel right. At first, I thought she was a changed, resolved character, as if she somehow grew out of the way that she was approaching problems, and then she was able to eventually get to a place where she tried doing things differently. With that in mind, then I was thinking, all right, then the outcome of the story, which is the logistical ending of the story, ended in success, and then there were good feelings at the end. The judgment was good. So it was a success, good story. But then I looked up the screenplay again because I was thinking, wait, that's not how it ended, because I haven't seen this in 2 months. So I had to look it up again, and it's, oh no, that's right. There was tearful goodbyes and maybe I'll see you somewhere down the road. So I knew that it was what we would call a bad judgment, where there are unresolved feelings. Not that it was a bad thing, but that the main character has personal issues and they really didn't get resolved. I know that's in the right area. And then there were a couple of other different things that I was working with. There's a lot of stuff that goes on to how these are all related, dependent upon whether or not this is what appears as a steadfast story, whether or not it's decision-driven, failure bad. It'll change how some of these through lines are organized and how they relate to one another. And I went through 3 or 4 different iterations. Like you can see them up here if I go to my stories. And you look at my list of stories, you'll see a bunch of different past lives, which you're like, no, that's not good. That's not good. Whereas if you look at Saltburn, got it right the first time. Holdovers, got it right the first time. And the reason for that is because the story form for past lives, what makes it feel so different and what everybody is attracted to in terms of the storytelling, besides the fact that it's beautiful, is this idea of the female mental sex. Male mental sex stories are super easy for me to figure out because it's cause and effect, problem and solution. There's a goal that needs to be resolved and it's done. With female mental sex stories, it's completely different in that it's less about a problem being solved and less about a goal that you're achieving, and actually something closer to an intention. So if I come in here and I look at the premise builder, so this is where you can build the stories. This is where I was building the story. If I go down here and you look at what best describes the purpose of this premise, the purpose of the narrative you want to tell. Is it about achieving a goal, which will be male mental sex, or is it about setting an intention, which is female mental sex? So this has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with sexual preference, anything like that. It's a lot more nuanced than that, and it's not so black and white here. This is just talking about the base operating system of the narrative itself, whether or not it's geared more towards goal-oriented problem solving, or if it's oriented more towards justifications and the balance of inequities and moving in a direction, like setting an intention. So in other words, the difference between Star Wars and the Matrix, Star Wars is very much achieving a goal. All right, we got this problem. We put the little missile into the thing, it blows up, we're done. Matrix is different. I'm not sure. I think I'm on the right track. I'm going to tell everybody what's going on here, a little phone call. That's setting an intention. So that's what sets Past Lives apart from anything else this year, which is like Saltburn or Holdovers, which are both male mental sex and very much goal-oriented. When you set that into place, what happens is these endings down here, it changes the dynamic. If you're not talking about a story that is about problem solving and about achieving a goal, you're not talking about stories that end in triumph or they're tales of virtue or they're somehow tragedies, although there is a somewhat tragic element to what happens at the end of Past Lives. What you're looking at in terms of female mental sex are areas of composure. So if you think of the Matrix, when he has found the balance between what he knows about the Matrix and then his own internal representation of the world, and everything balances out, he's composed. And that would be the female mental sex equivalent of what a triumph story is. And then for the other narratives, besides being in a state of ultimate composure, you can just be present. You can have this feeling of stagnation where things aren't evolving. And then another ending that pops up is the complete disconnection. And I didn't feel great about that for Past Lives. I didn't feel like she was disconnected, and I really didn't feel like she was stagnant. So then that's when I realized, oh, the argument of the premise isn't about her balancing things out. It's just about growing through the inequities that are present in the story. So you'll notice when I switched it over to a steadfast resolve, so she's just going through the narrative, then it just breaks down into two different kinds of endings. Either there's some sort of transcendence, which really doesn't happen in the story, or check this out, inertia. So the inertia that I thought that was in the relationship story through line was actually the entire story itself. And it won't really affect the narrative too much here because of this, the fact that it's female mental sex and because it's growing. Whether or not the plot ends up success or failure doesn't even matter. What really matters are just the emotional fulfillment aspect of it at the end, whether or not it was resolved or if there's that feeling of, oh, just not there. And so that to me is what Past Lives is: setting an intention, growing, and then getting to that place of inertia. Actually, the entire narrative is about inertia. It's not just getting to a place. See, that would be a more male mental sex. It's more about moving in that direction. So that was what was going on there. So I knew the relationship story domain, so where all the conflict is, the inequity that's coming in their relationship, was the separation between the two of them, the universe. If there is such a thing as past lives and then future lives, and then we're all in this universe and we just keep coming back and forth and getting back together every time over and over again, then our relationship story through line would be perfectly set in universe. That's what we're exploring there. And the fact that they're separated when one moves to a different country, that would feel great. So then the intention of the story, where she's moving towards, and it's actually throughout the entire narrative, is this idea of memory. And it's not that she's remembering things. It's not, oh, I've got to remember exactly what's going on. It's just the reunion. If you think of the memory as the recognition of somebody and the reunion aspect and all those feelings that come up, because this also includes the husband, that is in the objective story, puts it in that domain of mind to help balance out the relationship story here. And then I just figured if she, I can't quite remember everything that happens in the story, but I do recall there is this feeling of her more dealing with the psychology aspect of things, which in this case would deal with who she is, the kind of circumstances that are involved, the situation that she's married, her own sense of herself. Those felt much more like her issues. And then so it was a matter of which one of these elements represents the argument, quote unquote, of the narrative. And I instantly, because I was thinking of that inertia condition in the relationship story, I really liked actuality as being the focal point for her, and then perception being what's coming from Hay and also from her husband, because there's a bit of a handoff there in the obstacle character. And the idea that she is completely focused on, is this real? Is this something really? Is this what's really going on? I need to know for sure what's real and what's actual here. That's where her attention is focused. And then the other side to help balance that out is a perception. So to help balance out what's really real is what do you perceive as being there? And the sweetness that's coming from both sides, or at least both gentlemen on the other side, is that perception. Your perception matters just as much as what's real. It's not like they really resolve anything. There's that state of inertia that goes through, but there is this interplay between thematics in the narrative, which is why it feels so good, why it gets nominated for all these different awards. Who knows? It could win by the time anybody actually sees this video. What I really liked about this story form, it says action adventure. Obviously, it's not an action adventure. Ignore that for right now. But if I go to decision driven, I felt that she was very much in her place as to who she was or what she was dealing with, and had a lot of agency in the choices that were being made, and that kind of pushed the narrative. It's really hard because in a female mental sex, there's no real like plot point that starts out the story. There's not like something blows up and then you have to solve it. It just kicks in, and then there's some decisions along the way, and then at the end it's, hey, let's part ways. And again, the objective story is so dialed down when it comes to a female mental sex story, as opposed to like Saltburn or Holdovers, anything that was more male mental sex, where the emphasis is the objective story. The focus is more on the relationship story and the main character. Those are seen as being the most important. So those get elevated in the mix. But the thing that I really loved was, so if she's steadfast and she's the one that's just growing, then the condition upon all these feelings that she's going through is order. So keeping things orderly, keeping the system in place, staying married, whether or not she can break out of that or not break out of that, she grows into that orderly, almost like by staying orderly and staying with what has been arranged for her, not like an arranged marriage, but arranged dynamics in her life, is what leads to that bad feeling. And then to balance it in the obstacle character for both husband and Hay, there's this condition of knowing, oh, I know what's going on. I know her. I know that we had this in the past. And it's not like there's a switch that is flipped at the end, but more that they grow into more thoughtfulness. So definitely the husband grows into more thoughtfulness, like, hey, I'm really glad that you came here. Hay is, by the end of it, do you think that we had some kind of past life? Is that what we had? So he has grown out of just that knowledge or not even knowing what's there to now thinking about it. And then that also leads to the inertia and the bad feelings because now he feels it. So the idea in the narrative is that she's focused on seeing if something is for real. That's her character focus. And by focusing on it and staying that and growing through that, it pulls everybody else over to greater amounts of thought to think about, oh, wow, is this actual past life? And then just all those unresolved feelings, all those heartbreaking feelings. That's the narrative of past lives. That's how everything comes together to tell that story. Looking at the story form here in subtext, when you build all this together and you blend these two elements together about the plot of past lives, it's falling into that concern because everything gets so overwhelming. and then also seeing if everything's for real. The premise is, while it might seem essential, the constant quest to see if something is for real can halt your personal development in its tracks, burdening your current relationships with the heavy shadows of revisiting past lives. Now, this is just a generated premise based on the dynamics that are in the narrative mixed with the focus on the character and the plot here. So the character focusing on that actuality, seeing if something is for real, and then the plot element of the past, because it's a failure, because it's female mental sex, and they just get overwhelmed by the past lives. Down here at the bottom, that overwhelm. When you put those two together and you mix them with these other dynamics, then what the story is arguing is this premise up here, what it's putting forth. And then here is also a generated explanation for if you're trying to develop this for your own story. But I felt like it had a lot of resonance with the actual film. The story's argument suggests a thematic exploration of the tension between the pursuit of truth and the cost of that pursuit on personal growth and relationships. That feels like the film and is a nice understanding of what's going on. Like, you could see past lives and be like, wow, that was great. I have no idea how I would do that myself. Or I've always wanted to tell a story like that, but everybody's telling me, oh, I need a hero's journey and I need to save a cat and I need to do this. You have to refuse the call and then go into all the fun and games and all that other nonsense. This is a way to understand a beautiful narrative and to see it from a completely unique perspective and to say, hey, it's okay to tell these kind of stories. It's okay. It's okay to focus it more on the balance between things, and things don't always work out. And as we move forward, because as people take advantage of AI generated stuff, there are going to be a lot of narratives that are geared towards hero's journey and save the cat. It's going to be the same thing like times 10,000. So just knowing that this is available to you, I hope inspires you to write something a little more nuanced, a little different. It doesn't mean every story has to be this. You can still do the hero's journey stuff. There are ways to make it more meaningful and more impactful. For reference, in subtext, the engine's been running since 2021, right? March 2021. Where is that? It has been running since March of 2021. And I think there are currently 5,000 out of the 32,000 possible narratives that have been generated. 5,000 or 6,000. If the narrative has already been created and generated and somebody asks for it again, they just get that one already. It's instantaneous. If it's something like past lives and it's all these really complex, nuanced thematics, I actually have it so it builds it on the fly, and usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. I have it purposefully set slow because I'm checking the work and doing all this other stuff. I'm sure there's a way to make it faster. But the idea is that because it's so complex and nuanced and everything, that it had to build it from scratch. So that was what I wanted to go over for past lives, the story form here. If you have any questions about this kind of story or how you can build a similar type story in subtext, feel free to reach out or leave a comment below. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.